Donnie Yen's career has had quite an arc. In the early 80s, the kid from Boston emerged on the martial arts scene with a picture-perfect face and a Hollywood build. He was pushed relentlessly by Yuen Woo-ping, who believed he was the ideal contender to be the next big action star and compete with the likes of Jackie Chan. And Donnie Yen did not disappoint. He epitomized the modern kickboxing trend in 80s Hong Kong with a mix of taekwondo and boxing, smart counters, and clever footwork, and his traditional martial art training made it easy for him to code switch into wuxia territory whenever he needed. But none of this seemed to be enough for Donnie Yen. He wanted to do something very different. He wanted to be uncooperative. Not his personality, but his action style. Donnie Yen's martial art training basically begins when he comes out of the womb. As the son of Bao Sim Mark, the woman who would essentially bring wushu to the United States, Donnie Yen had martial arts in his blood. Meanwhile, in the late 70s in Hong Kong, Yuen Woo-ping was directing kung fu comedies starring Jackie Chan, but Jackie went on to direct himself, so Yuen Woo-ping turned to Sammo in The Magnificent Butcher, who then went off on his own, and then Yuen Biao in Dreadnought, but it's as if Yuen Woo-ping couldn't find the ideal muse for his kung fu comedies. So he set about making these films himself with his opera brothers. Now, after doing a few of these goofy films, it seemed as though they were looking for a fresh new face. Donnie Yen fit the bill perfectly. Donnie's first film is in the same vein of Yuen Gabon comedies called Drunken Tai Chi, where we see Donnie's perfect kicks on display with a cool mix of Tai Chi and some wushu weapons. This scene against Wong Tao from Secret Rivals shows Donnie's skills with a chain weapon. His finale features awesome shapes against the great Yun Shunyi. Donnie Yen also does his own stunts in this film. The year after, Yuen Woo-ping directs Mismatched Couples, a dance movie with martial arts. No doubt inspired by Michael Jackson's Thriller and the film Breakin', Mismatched Couples shows an entirely different skill set for Donnie Yen. And again, he does his own stunts in the finale against Dick Wei. But then the inevitable happens. Donnie busts his shoulder doing a stunt. And a kickboxer is nothing with a bum shoulder. So it's probably around this time when Donnie seems to learn that he doesn't really want to be a stuntman. And he also doesn't seem to want to be a goof anymore. So, the kung fu comedy ends very quickly for Donnie Yen. 3 years pass and Donnie Yen goes back to Hong Kong, where he and Yuen Woo-ping reinvent the action language with Tiger Cage. Sammo Hung had been dominating the 80s modern choreography scene with a hard-hitting kickboxing brand that was more centered on impacts, which was much in keeping with Sammo's style. Sammo was a trapper and a counterattacker, the sign of a big guy who could step easily into conflict. But Donnie Yen wanted to bring boxing slips and taekwondo footwork, the workings of someone who was more agile, who was thinking on his feet, and that's exactly what he does here in Tiger Cage. His opponent is his trusted man, Michael Woods, and Donnie's movements are of course dialed in, but it's really his brain that we're watching here. The next year, Donnie Yen does an even better film with In the Line of Duty 4, which has most of the same cast and crew, and this time with Donnie Yen in a more central role. And when he's going against Yuen Woo-ping's younger brother, Yoon Ye-chor, Donnie's almost playing a game of quick draw, like he's trying to be the last one to move. And when you do stuff like this, your opponent naturally looks a little bit slower than you. Sucks to be Donnie Yen's opponent. Perfectly lined up kicks, awesome slips and counters. Salviti is totally unpredictable, which kind of helps add to the danger here. Donnie Yen's playing here more with timing and anticipation, again showing the thought behind the action. And this Fei Long to a sidekick is just insane. The last scene, Donnie has a rematch against Michael Woods, back again from Tiger Cage. Donnie seems to like using Woods because of the size difference, and Woods has this obvious trait that can separate his fights from the rest. Now, I like to call this trait a modifier. It's the thing that affects everything that a character does. So for Woods, his modifier is strength. But man, that guy could kick too. Look at this. Also, we see Donnie Yen using a stunt double when he's doing his falls here. Obviously, he didn't want a repeat of what had happened in Mismatched Couples. And then in the next year, in Tiger Cage 2, Donnie Yen is now the star. By now, he's basically dialed the action style in. Not just his physicality, but how his action is shot. The editing is slow, the shots tend to be wide, and he likes to do a slow-mo shot for impacts and to show nice kicking lines. Salviti returns for fight number 2, this time in a katana fight, which plays more like a raw Chinese sword fight, but hey, that's cool. It's a nice break from the kickboxing heavy choreography. And then he goes against Michael Woods for a third time with his hands freaking tied up. And when you kick with your hands tied together, you can't really generate the same amount of counter momentum with your arms, and so Donnie's just generating everything from his shoulders and hips. Amazing snap. Donnie Yen does a stun here, probably one of the last we'll ever see of him, since after this he lets his doubles do all the falling for him. Again, some more great kicking lines, some great kicks from Woods. Lastly, he goes against Robin Shou, and again, you get to see a lot of good boxing and taekwondo counters. After doing 3 films on a row with Yuen Woo-ping, Donnie Yen goes and does some other action films under other directors. Overall, this modern era of Donnie Yen's choreography emphasized counters, slips, footwork, and clean lines. The stories of his fights tend to follow a tactical pattern where he exposes a weakness that he can exploit with footwork, boxing, and taekwondo. He uses these tactics to mess with the opponent's head, switching up tactics ad hoc and throwing in occasional shapes as a way to keep us tuned in, and then using big impacts only once his opponent is worn out mentally. It's a surgical kind of storytelling that becomes more interesting the more you actually study these same art forms, which is why I think Donnie is more of a specialist or a sword maker, rather than an all-arounder like Jet Li or Yuen Biao. I'm going to get into this more later when I discuss Ip Man. Tiger Cage 1 and 2 and In the Line of Duty 4 stand out in the span of modern 80s choreography. His fights bear the marks of a choreographer who understands real combat. Now, Sammo and Bruce also understood combat, but something very different is happening with Donnie's choreography, so a little bit of comparison is in order. Around this same time, between 1986 and 1989, Sammo Hung was doing Eastern Condors, Dragons Forever, and Pedicab Driver. Now, at first glance, the action seems very similar. There's kickboxing and counters, but Sammo's choreography has 2 other elements that Donnie's choreography doesn't: Hapkido and a blend of Southern Kung Fu styles typical to Chinese opera. Now, Sammo's action is therefore a little more posy, which makes for beautiful shapes that are easy to follow. Looking at his fight with Yuen Woo from Eastern Condors, most of the handwork has hold moments, especially when he's using these bigger Southern styles. In Dragons Forever, when Jackie is fighting Benny Urquidez, we see the same kind of holds. Now, for an attacker to throw a punch and hold it long enough for the opponent to give a response requires a certain amount of cooperation. And Sammo sets this cooperation level to a bare minimum needed to give a nice shape without sacrificing realism. Sammo would do a similar style in Pedicab Driver in 1989. And this is not a critique of Sammo. This is simply how he combines Hapkido and Southern Kung Fu styles with kickboxing to make geometric shapes that are easy for the viewer to follow. You don't really need to understand fighting to understand Sammo's action. Bruce Lee's Wing Chun sequences, impressive for their speed and intensity, also rely on these holds. Bob Wall here deliberately keeps his block up so that Bruce can parry it down. Within the context of Wing Chun, this stuff is all good, so again, this is not a critique, it's just an explanation for why this action looks the way that it does. Now, most traditional martial arts are taught in this cooperative way. The purpose is to do things slowly within a small predictable scenario in order to train muscle memory. No problem with that. But when a choreographer falls back too much on these cooperative movements, there's a chance that the audience will think that the attacker isn't really trying, which reduces the danger of the fight. Now, if your brand is big dynamic poses, then maybe this can work, but again, it bears a certain tactical cost. And so, looking at Donnie's choreography during the late 80s, to maximize the danger of the fight, he doesn't really let his opponents cooperate with him, and he's not cooperating with them. There are practically no holds here, because the goal is to make the action look as real as possible. And so this is an exciting time when Donnie is pushing further away from the shapely side of the spectrum that Sammo was on. But there are 2 difficulties here. First off, you have to be really good to do this kind of uncooperative action, which sort of restricted Donnie's talent pool. I'm not sure that many stuntmen were willing to tango with him doing this kind of action. And secondly, I'm not sure the audience was ready for purely tactical movements yet. Action comedies were hot, and violence tended to be more exaggerated and not quite as subtle and visceral as Donnie wanted to make it. And so like that, Donnie's modern choreography abruptly ends, and he makes a major pivot into a different career path, wuxia. Now, Donnie Yen wasn't all boxing and taekwondo. He had traditional training too, and this allowed him to effortlessly transition into the genre of wuxia, or as it's sometimes known, wire fu. The first wuxia film he does is Choi Hark's Once Upon a Time in China 2, under Yuen Woo-ping as the choreographer. His first fight against Jet Li is this laundry scene, which is a staff fight where they're cramped by the location. And you can see Donnie isn't doing his quick draw style here anymore. He's always on his toes, it seems. So maybe he's met his match with Jet Li, whose more orthodox style matches Donnie's nicely. The camera and editing style is almost the same as his 80s kickboxing films, too. Wide, long takes, slow-mo impacts. The final fight features some complex filmmaking, which is the kind of filmmaking that you need to sell prop gags like these. Now, this is the delicate balance in wuxia. You're floating people and objects around on wires, making gags that exist on a sort of mythological level, but your montage shots need to be long enough to be readable and tell the story, and yet not too long so that people and objects start to defy physics. Choi Hark seems to have perfected this balance, and Yuen Woo-ping's action is made all the better thanks to it. The highlight is definitely the dual staff versus dual staff, full of awesome shapes. I don't know if modern grounded wuxia gets any better than this, really. Donnie's footwork is fun, a little bit of Monkey King in there. The last scene is Donnie demonstrating how doing his own laundry for years has finally paid off. Donnie showing some chain whip skills from his wushu days, a little bit of cloth fu here, something that we saw in Dreadnought and even Taoism Drunkard. It's funny how these concepts mature over time, from goofy gags into incredible action scenes like this. The whip gets so close to Jet's head here, it's crazy. It's like Donnie was saying, hey, try to do some boxing slips if you think you're so fast. I think it's safe to say that for his first wuxia film, Donnie knocks it out of the park. Moving on, his fight in Dragon Inn in 1992. Action is done by Ching Siu-tung, whose style is less about showing and more about just conveying concepts. The concept here is the sandstorm and the flurry of weapons. Butterfly and Sword, the year after, action again by Ching Siu-tung. Donnie throws a few kicks, but again, this style focuses less on the specifics of combat. It's still more on the evocative side. In that same year, Donnie Yen plays Wong Kei-ying in Iron Monkey. He's back again under Yuen Woo-ping, who's doing the action. Now, the fights are sped up a lot in this rooftop fight against Yu Rongguang, so we can see that Yuen Woo-ping is going more into the evocative territory here as well. Donnie's fight against the bandits is a nice showpiece for Donnie, mixing some animal styles with kicks. And Wong Kei-ying obviously wouldn't have done Taekwondo kicks, but who cares, this is wuxia. Donnie throws 6 roundhouse kicks here with 10 sound effects. You wonder if this inspired the Ip Man chain punches that we see 15 years later. Donnie's back again with Yuen Woo-ping, this time as Beggar So in Heroes Among Heroes. Now this movie takes the shooting style of Iron Monkey and turns it up a notch. Fights are sped up even faster, camera angles are even more canted this time. Now this filmmaking style became really popular in the mid-90s in Hong Kong. It seems that you get this kind of unorthodox shooting style in films when the times are less certain, such as was the case in this era preceding the Hong Kong handover, which was only 4 years away. So even though the PRC promised that Hong Kong would remain unchanged, nobody knew exactly what would happen. So Hong Kong filmmakers had no idea if the same rules would apply after 1997, and with uncertainty looming, why not just start breaking the rules now? Now there were some similar shooting styles in the late 90s in the USA, so there might be multiple factors here. Anyway, whatever was the ultimate cause of this pre-handover style of filmmaking, I think it kind of works here. It's sort of just the right mix of montage filmmaking and physicality, and Donnie's drunken style is really cool. It's really agile, lots of great kicks. The next year is Wing Chun, another Yuen Woo-ping movie. The action is even more evocative this time. Donnie ends up starring in his own martial arts series called The Kung Fu Master, and the style again is very similar. And then another Yuen Woo-ping film is released in 1994 which does not star Donnie Yen, Fist of Legend, which is a remake of Bruce Lee's Fist of Fury. Now, even though Donnie Yen had legit combat training and he could probably do justice to Bruce Lee better than anyone else at the time, Jet Li is chosen as the star for Fist of Legend. Now, Yuen Woo-ping was just the choreographer, and who knows why Donnie wasn't chosen for the lead, or who made that call, and Jet does a great job anyway, but then the very next year we see Donnie Yen starring in the Fist of Fury TV series. The action in this is sped up, almost comically at times. And when you put Fist of Fury, the series, side by side with Fist of Legend, you can see Donnie Yen is replicating Bruce's physicality in his kicks, while Jet's movement is almost nothing like Bruce's. After this, he goes back into modern films like Asian Cop High Voltage in 1995, Satan Returns in 1996, and then 2 years after Fist of Legend comes out, he's in Iron Monkey 2, choreographed by Yuen Woo-ping again. And so, during this time, whenever Donnie's the action director, he's using the same style of filmmaking and editing that he was picking up from his previous wuxia films. And why was he doing this? Well, I think that whereas most wuxia filmmakers were using this style to evoke mythical kinds of movement, Donnie's trying to leverage it to increase tension and, again, reduce cooperation in his action. This action style was also less physically demanding on the talent, since so much of the action storytelling was done with camera and editing. He was essentially opening the action franchise to a wider group of talent, and he was about to put this style to the ultimate test in his directorial debut. All of this begins to come together when we watch Donnie Yen's 1997 film Legend of the Wolf. After a violent, impressionistic opening where we meet the cast of villains whom he's going to fight later on in the film, we know that we're watching a new kind of Donnie Yen movie. Now, I know a lot of you don't like the style of action in this film, but I love it. I might love it more than any other Donnie Yen film, actually. I don't expect you to love it, but I hope that at least you'll understand why I see it the way that I do. Because I think it's incredibly important in the scope of all of Donnie Yen's work. Action scenes are all over this movie, which mostly takes place as a flashback to the wilderness in post-World War II China, where the war has taken its toll on the people. This next fight scene has Donnie and Deo Wong attacked by bandits. Donnie has a war flashback and blows up on him. You can't even see what's happening half the time, but that's intentional. Here's some Fist of Fury round-robin kicking moments, and then slow-mo, fast, slow, insert, montage, blood. There's clearly a rhythm that he's going for here. Sammo and Yuen Woo-ping had shot with similar rhythms in the past, but now Donnie's taking it to the extreme. Yeah, look at his kicks too. They're as good as they've ever been here. I've heard somebody describe the style of this movie as anime, but I would definitely say this is a wuxia movie. The fight in the shack has some more trademark kicks, but it even seems to have a double sometimes for some reason. Maybe Donnie was running camera? And check out this real contact hit. You can see him doing similar hits in Special ID later on. And he tries not to draw attention to the tiny little cabin that he's fighting in. He didn't have much money to do this movie, and so he squeezes every penny and makes the fight seem grander than it really is. And that's all due to the filmmaking style. The chain as a modifier for his enemy is really cool. Every enemy has one of these modifiers in his film. It's like good video game bosses. There's a funny attempt at a taunt here, but whatever. Shameless plug, we totally ripped this idea off in Contour. So thanks, Donnie. Some nice Sammo-style inserts. Lau Ga-Long would do some of these too, to show those little nuanced martial art movements. This is definitely not Donnie falling through the table, but again, he didn't care about being a stuntman. And finally, splitting the wood, kind of a callback to Once Upon a Time in China too. Ben Lam shows up as the villain, and we have this gang versus gang battle. Donnie gets some great kicking shapes in here again. Ben Lam also shows off some good boot. Check out this guy in the background just running into the frame to join the stunt. Push kick to the face. Man, the kicks are so on point. Come on, guys, why don't you like this movie? Next, we have the running scene. This is straight out of the Dragon Inn movie again. It's a fun idea, kind of like Mad Max, but on your feet. You blast this guy in the head with a stick. And Deo Wong's action scenes are good. He's very physical and everything's very energetic, and his scenes demonstrate how Donnie's wuxia-style franchise can make comedians, pop stars, and general actors look really good. Of course, you have the magic revolver with infinite ammo. Here's the fight against Clawman, played by Muk Wai-chung. And this is the best in the film, I think. At this point in the finale, you also start to realize that every shot of action has directionality. Donnie never stands around trading blows with people. There's always a vector to his action. And this, again, looks like a stunt double. I don't know, maybe Donnie was running camera again. Clawman rips apart 10 of these trees, but it's just more montage editing, because when we see the damages, there are only a few trees back there. The modifier here is the claw hand. Donnie's alternating the fast choreography with inserts and slow-mo shots, keeping the pacing interesting. Donnie turns the tables with some joint locks and goes Bruce Lee on him with more solid boot. And these last two impacts are so crazy. And this last one is a wire wrap, and you can see it wrapped around his waist, but it's being pulled through the bushes, so you can't see the wire itself. Beautifully done. The final fight against Ben Lam, very montagey again, but more good boot. Look at that shape. Chain kicks. Ben Lam's modifier is Muay Thai knees and a clench. The rhythm again is slow-mo, close-ups, and then longer, faster shots of action show the effect of something over time. Donnie turns the tables with judo, and they fall down a hill. This huge rock almost smashes his hand, and you have a nice cinematic beatdown at the end. Alright, look, I know, I probably didn't change your mind on Legend of the Wolf. But you have to agree with me on at least one thing. If this film is anything, it's tension and conflict. Clashing people with clashing editing. Donnie Yen sees fighting this way, and so it makes sense that that's how he made his movie. Donnie then directs 2 more films, Shanghai Affairs and Ballistic Kiss, with a similar action style. The name of the game here, again, is clashing. Uncooperative filmmaking, uncooperative choreography. As we're now deep into the late 90s, on the other side of the world, a lot of Hong Kong filmmakers and stars are entering Hollywood. And so the late 90s in Hong Kong are an interesting period that deserves its own action essay, but in essence, here's what's going on. Great Britain had leased Hong Kong for 99 years starting in 1898 and acted as a colonial administration which generally let the filmmakers make whatever films they wanted. The British were even openly mocked in Hong Kong films of that era, but I guess if you paid your taxes, they didn't care. Now, obviously, I'm oversimplifying things here. The PRC has its own views on the handover and censorship, and I won't get into the different sides of the debate here, but long story short, in 1997, the lease ends and Hong Kong is ceded to mainland China. And so the major Hong Kong stars and filmmakers of the era, like Jackie Chan, Yuen Woo-ping, Michelle Yeoh, Chow Yun-fat, and Corey Yuen, all went to Hollywood. Now, this wasn't necessarily because they didn't like the PRC or that they didn't like China, but anytime you have a major change like this, you can expect that major players in the industry are going to find a more predictable environment to do their business. And Hong Kong filmmakers were no different. They had already had plenty of experience producing in America already, so the time seemed ripe. As a result, the late 90s were awesome in American martial arts cinema. As for Donnie Yen, though, he didn't go straight to America in 1997. He instead goes to Germany and tries out his brand of action in Der Puma in 1998 for a season. He then heads to America in 2000 for Highlander Endgame. He even looks like he's dictating the camera and editing in some of these scenes. This is some really great stuff. In Blade 2, he's got a nice triple sidekick with some sword work, but Wesley Snipes is a star here, so that's that. And then he's the villain in Jackie Chan's Shanghai Knights. Now, for a lot of us, this fight was a dream come true, but it's a little bit short on the martial arts. Now, this is a good case study of Hollywood versus Hong Kong action. American producers don't really allow their big budget films to end with just a martial art fight, so fights like this will be centered around big set pieces like the Gatling gun here. Everything else is kind of seen as irrelevant. Fortunately, there's an uncut version, and we can see that there's actually a lot more happening in the tent. The handwork is a sort of mix of Donnie's quick hands and Jackie's defensive styles, some good Jackie-style gags. The staff fight outside too. The released version keeps most of the big gags, but again, a lot of this stuff is cut out, like this cool bit with the life preserver. Look, I love all this extra fight stuff, but in a $50 million movie like this, the producers are going to cut most of it anyway. So, I mean, it even has a term, shoe leather, since they don't really think it adds much to the scene. Although it does make you wonder how much might have also been cut from Donnie's other American films. And in the middle of all of this, Donnie Yen goes to Japan to choreograph The Princess Blade in 2001, again, showcasing his montage style of action design here. Donnie goes back to Hong Kong. He choreographs for Twins Effect. He directs the 2004 Protégé de la Rose Noire, where his sister Chris Yen throws down with some very Donnie Yen style action. We also see him in Hero and Seven Swords, showing that he can still move. But none of this even comes close to comparing with what happens next. It's 2005. Ong Bak has come out 2 years prior, and Donnie undoubtedly wants to make his mark. He does Killzone, also known as Sha Po Lang, under the direction of Wilson Yip. And now he gets to do what he's probably wanted to do ever since his 80s films with Yuen Woo-ping: beat the living hell out of another guy on camera. And he does it against Wu Jing, who can take a beating. And this is full-on uncooperative Donnie Yen. The fight feels so dangerous and unpredictable because he refuses to fall back on standard fighting conventions. There are no excess holds, there's no seminar choreography. The fight is constantly moving along a vector. Just like his best stuff from the 80s, we get to see his brain working, especially during the pauses, the anticipations. It's just not your standard Hong Kong fare, and that's why it rockets Donnie to the top. And props to Sammo with his fights too. Some nice wrestling and judo here. Some of it is really dirty and uncooperative looking too. Donnie the next year, again under Wilson Yip, does Dragon Tiger Gate. More of his uncooperative style on display. The action in this is really unique, and there's some really unorthodox stuff in the finale. And then in 2007, once more under Wilson Yip, Flashpoint takes uncooperative choreography to the next level. John Salviti comes back and brings in some MMA, and Donnie goes all in. I mean, this kind of action is unprecedented. Donnie Yen just punched a guy. Somebody do something! The amount of danger is awesome. Look at this suplex. And his scene against Colin Cho is, I mean, look at it. That doesn't even look choreographed. And we have the same pacing as Legend of the Wolf. Slow-mo, insert shots, long, fast sequences, but it's all readable. a martial artist can stand there and just appreciate this. Donnie resorts to some judo here to turn the tables, again much like Legend of the Wolf, although this time far less impressionistic. If you ask me, Flashpoint goes down as one of the most innovative martial art films of all time, easily in the top 5. But Donnie Yen wasn't done. He was building another kind of uncooperative hero, Ip Man. With Ip Man, Donnie Yen reinvents Wing Chun choreography, something that nobody had been able to crack since Sammo Hung perfected the Shapes version of it in Prodigal Son back in 1980. And so it comes as no surprise that Sammo himself is behind the action, along with Tony Leung Soo-hung. That guy's totally underrated, by the way. This is the 4th collaboration between Donnie and director Wilson Yip, and we can see this new action language is just as refined as it was in Flashpoint. True to Donnie Yen form, Ip Man doesn't cooperate. He steps into people's space, he intercepts them. He's a pain, and that's why we love him, and that's why he's a Donnie Yen character. The dojo scene from Ip Man, the rapid-fire punches, the leg and arm breaks, it's all relentless and it shows a totally different side of Donnie. He's not the uncooperative fighter, he's the uncooperative philosopher. Now, I would like to take a minute to compare Ip Man to Yuen Woo-ping's 2006 film Fearless starring Jet Li. Now, both of these films are anti-colonial period pieces, even with some of the same set pieces, but told from totally different perspectives. In the platform scene in Fearless, Yuen Woo-ping lets the wires do the storytelling where Jet's character Ho Yun-jia almost falls out of the ring. But Sammo has the camera and editing tell the same kind of story to keep it more within reality. Ho Yun-jia overcomes difficulty by having a better handle on physics-defying maneuvers, pressure points, and animal-style conventions. So this is like a case study of Yuen Woo-ping giving Jet control of the full spectrum of Chinese martial culture, since Yuen Woo-ping always saw Jet as a quote-unquote martial arts encyclopedia. A sort of embodiment of China as central to the world with a unique, encyclopedic answer to everything. Ho Yun-jia punches, claws, uses weapons, and even does TKD with a double. And you can really only do stuff like this with someone like Jet Li or Yuen Biao, as Sammo did in Knockabout. These guys are not simply martial art masters, they're all-around performers, much like the vaudeville all-in-one acts who could sing, dance, fall, fight, flip. They're callbacks to an older era of generalized knowledge that Yun Gaban loved, and here it serves as the ultimate weapon against oppression in Fearless. Answers to all the problems in a film like this flow through the performer in an ecstatic sort of way. These kinds of performers serve as an interesting counterweight to Donnie Yen. Because if Jet's Ho Yun-jia is mythical, then Donnie Yen's Ip Man is historical, rooted deeply in one system of martial arts that seeks its own justification in history. This is perfectly in line with Donnie's philosophy that he had carried from the 80s. Donnie picks one tool. It's sort of an autistic way of thinking, something that a lot of us might actually be able to appreciate. He's like a sword master. Donnie's Ip Man hones his tool until this one thing becomes his ultimate weapon against oppression. So Donnie isn't pretending to be an encyclopedia. He's like a well-made jackhammer, but he's a moral kind of jackhammer. So Jet's Ho Yun-jia uses strange movements for moral ends, but Donnie's Ip Man jackhammer has no esoteric solutions to problems. He simply shuts the machine off once he's exhausted his opponent. Truth be told, I always preferred Donnie Yen's focused style to Jet's more ecstatic style, but that's maybe because I'm a little bit more on the autistic side. My dad was a mechanic and a tool salesman, and I used to catalog his tools, and so I would always obsess over imaginary situations where a single tool could solve every problem in the world. So these mythical justifications for tools have always appealed to me, as opposed to mythological people. But when I was analyzing Ip Man and Fearless side by side, I actually started to appreciate Fearless and Jet Li even more. I can sort of understand the other side of the spectrum now because, again, it serves as an interesting counterweight to the swordmaker type that Donnie Yen is playing, like an ironsmith who's by nature less cooperative than the ecstatic because he's so invested in his tool that he would never abandon it when a problem arises. Instead, he perfects how he uses this very tool. Two different styles, two totally different kinds of personalities. Jet's more fluid and accommodating, Donnie's more viscous and uncooperative. Now here's some more context, now that Donnie Yen's got SPL, Flashpoint, and Ip Man under his belt. Compare these three films to his 1980s films, which had their boxing slips and taekwondo techniques, which were beautiful, and some guys did successfully copy those techniques like Ridley Choi, but back then his influence was mostly relegated to Hong Kong cinema. His style didn't have the same global appeal of something like Jackie Chan's hot touch blocks or Tony Jaa's real contact hits, and I think this is because Donnie's brand from the 80s was just so friggin' hard to do. It's still hard to do stuff like this. It looks amazing, but as a performer, how do you do this unless you're really a fighter? But now in the 2000s, Donnie's got his baton movement from SPL, punching the guard in Flashpoint, and the rapid-fire Wing Chun punches from Ip Man, which have become all the rage, and I'm totally guilty. I ripped off all three of these. So this speaks to Donnie Yen's ability to make an action language that could not just be understood, but replicated by people all over the world. But his action storytelling is basically the same. His enemies are defined by their modifiers, and Donnie's character uses a single tool to find ways to undermine those modifiers. Wu Jing's knife is more dangerous than his baton in SPL, but he exploits this with some trapping and timing. He takes advantage of Sammo's size in SPL with wrestling, he undermines Colin Show's kickboxing and Flashpoint with some aggravating judo and jiu-jitsu, and he treats the rigid limbs of his opponents in Ip Man like he treats the Wing Chun dummy. It's all a tactical game for him, and we delight in watching him think. And let's not forget the director of these three films, Wilson Yip. Their collaboration is clearly something special here. Alright, in 2008, Donnie's an international superstar, but he's got a lot more ahead of him. Next year in Bodyguards and Assassins, we get a little bit of action with Kung Lee, but it's short. In 14 Blades the next year, Donnie Yen's got some longer scenes, but again, they're more of the montage style. Ip Man 2, the same year, builds on the Ip Man style again under Sammo Hung. Lots of impact-style choreography on display. And a lot of old familiar faces like Lo Mang from the Venoms and one of my favorites, Fong Hak-on. Same year, Legend of the Fist is another take on Fist of Fury, very montagey this time. And then the next year, Donnie does Wuxia, or Dragon, which mostly has this montage-style action again, but there's this investigation scene, which is one of the coolest action scenes ever made. I mean, look at these shapes. Look at them. Look. What is that thing? It's a fist pointed up, or what's that shape for? It's awesome. Donnie's doing the quick draw style thing again here, and then that same year, The Lost Bladesman is Donnie Yen as Guan Yu, and this is, again, full-on Donnie. Every fight is shot clean, the performances are precise. This one really stands out, and just like in Ip Man, Guan Yu has his one tool, the Guan Dao, and this is the one solution to every problem he encounters. Special ID 2013, he goes back to his modern uncooperative choreography with Savidi having a heavy hand in the action this time. The best scene is this one in the nightclub. He just blasts the guys here. His kicks are still great. A lot of the finale against Andy On plays with the messiness of real fighting too. Iceman 3D next year, back to the montage style. The scale is huge, so the fighting unfortunately takes a back seat. Monkey King 2014, same year, same kind of deal, more of the wuxia style, a bit of montage, lots of VFX. Same year, 2014, is Kung Fu Jungle or Kung Fu Killer. Fancy Wong's got a great sword scene here. Donnie Yen's got two scenes, but they're almost overproduced. The camera's sometimes so crazy that while you're trying to orient yourself, you almost miss the action. And look at the editing in the end fight. I mean, this could have been really good, but they keep breaking the line of action. Donnie's on the left, then he's on the right, now he's on the left again. Donnie's always been good about filming things so you can kind of follow the vector of action, but this one just falls apart. No idea why it was shot or edited this way, but this could have been another standout Donnie film. It's also not very clear what the modifiers are here. Everything's a little bit more generalized, both for Donnie and the villain, so it's a little harder to track the story of the fight scenes. We don't get to see the same focus on detail here. Instead, again, the set pieces are so huge that they start to take priority over the fighting. 2015, the next year, Ip Man 3, Donnie's going against a big cast of enemies like Mike Tyson, Saruk Kanwilai, the Thai guy. The action in Ip Man 3 is... it's a mix. I mean, you have moments like these where the guys are just kind of standing around taking a beating and there's no real threat. So, for example, this guy punches and just leaves his arm there. And then this guy on the right, like, what happened to him? Did he get hit? He just kind of falls away for some reason. It's just really sloppy. Or where the camera work is just, like, not that interesting. There's a montage style of filmmaking that's similar to Sammo's, but it doesn't have the same impact. Now, the action was done by Yuen Woo-ping this time, but kind of makes you wonder if he was even there during some of these moments. Like, there's a part of me that kind of wishes they would turn down the production value. Like, what's the purpose of this long top shot? Now, usually a top shot will be used to show some kind of progression or to demonstrate an interesting action style or something interesting about the environment, but I can't help but feel that the action's not very compatible with this shot. When you do top shots, you have to be very selective of which kicks you do, because any kind of lateral snapping kicks like roundhouses only straighten out for a frame and then they lose their shape too quickly, so you lose all the geometry of the kicks. That's why whenever Yuen Woo-ping does top shots, like in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, he prefers when the performers do swinging kicks. And even in this top shot from The Matrix, the roundhouse kicks come at the same time to make it a really interesting silhouette. And if you're slipping punches, then the punches have to be dead on, otherwise they're completely off target and they don't look like they were going to hit anything anyway. And when Ip Man starts using weapons, it almost feels like Donnie's departing from what worked in the previous films. I mean, wasn't Wing Chun with his hands enough? So maybe he was being pushed toward the more ecstatic, encyclopedic style, maybe? Who knows? Maybe that was Yuen Woo-ping's influence there. The action in Ip Man 3 just seems more concerned about look than movement, and the choreography just doesn't have the same bite as the previous films. He does Rogue One in 2016 in Hollywood, which is okay, except for these stormtroopers. Like, come on, guys, what are you doing? You're running in the background toward him with a gun. They probably previs this action scene, assuming that the stunt performers would be running in from off camera. But Hollywood doesn't really care how you shoot previs most of the time. They're just going to shoot it how they're going to shoot it. And he kicks sand in this stormtrooper's face, but he's got a face shield on. So maybe the stunt performers were actually supposed to be those Sandman guys originally, but at the last minute they changed them to stormtroopers and put guns in their hands. Anyway, whatever. The next year he does Triple X with Vin Diesel. Cool opening scene with him. But why do they shoot like this in Hollywood? Why do they cut to the top shot for this? Why? Same year, Chasing the Dragon. Nice brawly fight. It's a little bit different for Donnie, but that's about it action-wise. Big Brother 2018 the next year reproduces some of the MMA action from Flashpoint and Special ID. Some uncooperative stuff in this again. Not as much of the montage style. Iceman 2018. We're really high concept again. I guess they're going for more of a blockbuster look, but it's nice seeing Kurata again giving us some good boot. This fight's not bad. Ip Man 4 2019. We got the racist Americans and their Japanese friends beating up guys in Chinatown. Production level is, again, it's super high and squeaky clean, but I can't even tell if this is a real location. It's great seeing Scott kicking in there. Is that a green screen? This axe kick to Scott's back is rad. Really feels like he's trying to get up. So again, it's the uncooperative nature of Donnie's action. The old school Hong Kong style would have been more blocky, but yeah, that's not what we're going for here. Next year is Enter the Fat Dragon. One of Donnie's coordinators, Kenji Tanigaki from Flashpoint, he'd worked his way up Donnie's team and he directs him here. He's also responsible for the action and the Rurouni Kenshin films. Anyway, Mulan 2020. Enough said. Why do they shoot like this? Raging Fire 2021. He's back full force in this awesome shantytown scene. This is pure Donnie. It feels like Donnie's got an action language here with firearms against Ben Lam, who was the villain in Legend of the Wolf 25 years earlier. He does crowd control against a room of guys by wrapping his arm with his bulletproof vest. Man, what a cool idea. Awesome kicks here. And there's some great uncooperative grappling later on against Ben Lam, too. The final fight is against Nick Z, who has 2 butterfly knives. There's some nice moments where Donnie's, again, thinking on his feet. I love this moment where he disarms one of the blades. There's some really good danger in this fight with the glass. But then Donnie loses his baton, and they don't really give this much detail. Now, this is a cliche that I keep seeing in fights where one guy disarms the other guy, but then they'll find a way to quickly disarm whoever still has a weapon just to justify having a hand-to-hand fight rather than trying to get the weapon back. This is something that we've kind of come to accept from martial art films. Mortal Kombat in 2021 did the same thing. Weapon versus weapon. One is disarmed and the other is disarmed almost immediately. But, alright, let's let that slide. Nick Z punches Donnie in the stomach even though he's wearing a bulletproof vest. Not sure how we're supposed to buy that. Donnie starts winning here. Some nice uncooperative action. Nick Z grabs a sledgehammer, which is when things get dangerous again. It's pretty cool. It kind of shows a desperate side of his character. Very nice. Some high concept action here. Good heft to the weapons. Donnie disarms the sledge with a pipe. But again, Donnie's disarmed almost immediately. So this happened twice. So the story that they're telling is that the hero needs a weapon in order to disarm the villain, but the villain doesn't need a weapon to disarm the hero. But when you size Nick Z and Donnie Yen up, this just doesn't really compute. In fact, in both of these cases, Donnie loses his weapon after just getting knocked around. It's not like there was even a technique involved. It would have made a lot more sense if the villain was bigger than Donnie Yen, but at any rate, the aesthetics of this scene and the broader action vision, and really that fight in the shantytown compensate for this very nicely. And last, as of late 2022, we're excited to see Donnie Yen in John Wick 4. It looks like he's going to be using a sword to block bullets now. No idea where that will go, but maybe Donnie's going to be an expert with the tool again. Although it looks like Keanu's doing the same thing with the sword too. I guess we'll see. Alright, let's recap all that. In 1984, Donnie Yen's first 2 movies are Yuen Woo-ping kung fu comedies that are star vehicles for him. But he doesn't like being a goofball, and he breaks his shoulder, so he probably doesn't want to be a stuntman either. His next 3 movies from 1988 to 1990 are modern Yuen Woo-ping actioners that reinvent modern choreography, introducing tactical boxing and taekwondo in brand new ways that are way ahead of their time. After starring in some more movies, Donnie switches to wuxia in 1992 under Yuen Woo-ping again, learns wuxia filmmaking, does this for 3 more years, breaks off and stars in movies for another 3 years. In 1997, he uses the wuxia filmmaking style to direct Legend of the Wolf,
best movie ever, by the way, followed by 2 more films. He does this to amplify his uncooperative style. He goes to Hollywood in 2000, does 3 movies, but we're not ready for him yet. Back to Wuxia, films with Hero in 2002, directs another movie in 2004. He does Sha Pulang in 2005 and reinvents modern choreography. Guys, it took Donnie Yen 21 years before he did SPL.
Now, I hear lots of people saying that they deserve their big break after doing movies for 8 or 10 years. So, just be patient. It took this guy 21 years.
Donnie Yen invents the MMA genre in 2007 with Salviti and Flashpoint.
Reinvents Wing Chun choreography with Sammo Hung and Ip Man in 2008.
A couple more years of Wuxia, 3 more Ip Man movies, a bunch of modern films, 4 Hollywood movies, in total a career that's lasted nearly 40 years. Completely reinvented the action genre at least 3 times. Donnie Yen entered the spotlight in 1984 as a movie star. A lot of pressure for a 20-year-old. He created a heterodox action style that at first might have been a little bit too much to handle for most people, and it kind of confined him to a relatively small circle of performers. But he never settled. He could have settled with Wuxia, but he didn't. So he pushed for an experimental style that could convey the tension that he was going for.
And to do that, he had to break off and become a filmmaker, creating a brand of wuxia action that allowed pop stars to be action stars. And later with Wilson Yip, he honed this montage style for his own star vehicles, which still convey a very contentious action style, but they allow action actors like Nick Zi, Max Zhang, and Andy On to participate. I think that the reason Donnie was able to design this action style was because he went off and made his own films. And as I said before, Donnie's characters appear uncooperative on camera, but behind the camera, he's actually very collaborative. In fact, this kind of uncooperative action really requires collaboration, because if the performers aren't totally in sync, then someone's going to get hit. And Donnie knows this, and he's probably only gotten more collaborative over the years. But just remember that from day one, it took him 21 years before he would begin to be an international action star. And it's been almost 20 years since then.
This is the tenacity of a fighter. And to make the kind of impact he made, to have the kind of success that he has had, you have to be at least a little bit uncooperative. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Make sure you join my Telegram channel at t.me/Eric Jacobus. I post a lot of additional updates there. My website is ericjacobus.com, which has my written material. And make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks.